You're very correct. So what they are doing is trying to check the organization, check their their assets, check the processes. If there's any security vulnerabilities, then they patch, right? So that is what security assessment and testing really means. So it's actually a very important process that every organization has to take, right? Every organization, as long as you're processing user data as part of their any kind of regulation you're doing, whether PCI, whether IPA, whether GDPR, you need to carry out a penetration test, security assessment test. So now on your assets. So it's critical for every organization to do that if you want to evaluate the security posture of your system, of your application. Some organization does not have, they don't even know, they don't do like asset inventory to know the kind of asset they have online, the kind of infrastructure they have online. They don't, right? And that is one of the importance of security assessment also, because they are going to help you. The penetration testers now, or the risk assessor, or the security auditor is going to like do an asset inventory for you, right? Gather every asset you have in your organization, then is going to now assess each and every one of them based on their criticality to look for security vulnerabilities and potential weaknesses that an external attackers or internal attacker can actually use to exploit the information or the resources you have in your organization. And that is going to actually compromise your confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization, which means that the organization has failed, right? So there's a lot of factors that comes in security assessment, a lot, right? Some organization, for some organization, you need to have some sort of certification before you be able to carry out their security test, or the strength of your department, maybe the security department has to be really strong, you know, some before they can give you um, that that audit, that security assessment to carry out for them. So another thing is the size of organization. Now, from the security assessor's part, so the size of your organization, the type of organization you run, the financial state of your organization, right, can also impact how they are going to carry out security assessment and testing, right? Because on the norms, like if you look at it, larger organizations are going to have large resources, right? And that means that you might need more sophisticated tools, more OEM to expensive tools to actually carry out proper security testing, right? But for simpler or smaller organization that has maybe 3 servers, 4 workstations, you don't really need a lot to carry out penetration testing on organizations like that. So yeah, from the security assessors part, the size of your organization, the kind of assets you want to test, and the kind of sector you play in actually has a lot to do with how they're going to charge you and how they are going to carry out that security assessment. So security assessment is not just done just for doing sake. Well, many organizations actually use it to pass maybe a certification, or maybe a regulation need for them to keep operating, right? But as an organization, you should always have security in mind, right? Security is like the gospel. You want to be preaching it everywhere you go, right? So security, carrying out security assessment, you have to tailor it to what the organization actually needs, right? And the objective of the organization. So as I've said, some organizations just need it to pass maybe a certification, or they need it for regulation, right? While some actually they are concerned about the security posture of their organization, right? So the way you're going to test for those with organizations is actually going to be different. But as a penetration tester or as a security assessor or auditor, you want to make sure that you actually do your due diligence and test appropriately, right? So the test itself, so security assessment test can come in three forms, right? It can be annually, you can do it annually, you can do it biannually, you can even do it quarterly. So it just depends on the sector you play in and the kind of data you hold, the kind of transaction you process in your organization. So security assessment is very important, is an essential component of any organization at all. As long as the organization has security in mind and they're always keen about the cybersecurity strategy, right? They always want to have security testing to their processes. And by doing that, it's going to be very easy for them to identify any vulnerabilities before an attacker see those vulnerabilities and exploit them and gain access into the organization and cause a data breach, right? You want to safeguard your asset as an organization and you want to protect your reputation, which is very, very important. So there are different type of audit. Audit is just a way of examining, or is a way of evaluating all your organization operations, not just your operations, your procedures, the controls you have in place, right? To make sure those controls you put in place to make sure that you are being compliant to regulations and standards, right? So that is what an audit is. So it's the process you carry out, right? The process you use to examine your organization. That is what an audit is, right? So in cybersecurity, audits are really important. They are really essential when it comes to even not just identification, even when you want to carry out mitigation of risk, right? You want to carry out an audit. And so in cybersecurity, there are different type of audits, right? So there's the internal audit, there's the external audit, and there's the third-party audit. Right? So the internal audits are carried out by your internal assessors, right? So you have like a department of audit, or I don't know. You just have like a set of people in your organization that can carry out audit for you, that can audit your organization, right? So it depends on what you want to audit. If is you want to, if the audit is for security testing, definitely you want to have like a security team in-house that is going to be testing the effectiveness of the organization's network resources, testing for vulnerabilities, looking for critical vulnerabilities or 0-day or anything that can impact the organization. That's your internal team. So that is what they do. Internal audit, that's what they do, right? So that is for the internal. So we have the external. So the external are conducted by external auditors. So these people are not part of your organization. They are independent, right? And what they do is they help you as an organization audit your assets. So the goal of external audit is actually to provide is actually most of the time is actually a necessity if you want to comply to requirements to regulatory requirement. You need to make sure that an external auditor comes to audit your organization, audit all your internal processes, audit all your assets, audit everything that they need to audit, right? It's part of the regulation requirement and also industry standard to do that. Right? So external auditors, their strategy actually is going to like they're not running the audit from A to Z. It's actually going to complement with what the internal auditors or the internal strategy the organization has already, right? So they are going to use that to provide different type of check and ensure that all the check and controls within the place are actually being followed, and all the checks you need to be certified to that regulatory requirement or industry standard is actually followed. So that is for the external auditor. They are just external people who are independent, who carry out security audits, right? Then we have the third party. So for third party audit, as the name implies, the audits are actually carried out by independent third party auditors. So they are not affiliated and they are not external auditors, right? They are not affiliated with your organization or any external auditor. So their own goal is actually to provide like a neutral and objective review of organization, right? Because I'm not connected to you in any way, right? And I just want to come and do the audit. So for external auditor, they are still going to tell you to do this, do that, put this thing in place. Third party auditor is coming to review all your internal control and processes in a neutral ground, right? So that is what external auditor use. They still use the existing strategy the organization has in place for auditing their environment. They still use that same mode. So and external, so one good thing about an external auditor is they can still help you make sure that those internal auditors and external auditors are actually following the processes and procedures they are supposed to be following, right? So that's why external third-party auditors are actually very important. All right, so these three different type of audits just depends on the different level of assurance or the different level of benefits they are going to have to your organization, right? Or the different level of assurance you want to have that your audits are actually carried out properly, right? So for internal audits, it gives you an highlight, overview, as an insight, right, to the effectiveness of your organization internal controls and policies, right? Where external auditors are coming externally, they're independent. They come into your organization, look at your processes, your procedures, and your controls, then give you recommendation where you need to fix, right? While the third party, they are coming on the neutral ground, right? They are independent too. And they will help you make sure that the internal auditor is actually using the right processes, right? It's actually doing the right thing. The external auditor, so the third party can be used to assess what external auditor and the internal auditor has done, right? So those are the three types of audit in cybersecurity: internal, external, and third party. So security controls. Security control testing. So security control testing is actually part of security assessment. Is an important part of cybersecurity that involves a third party or an external auditor actually testing your security controls in your organization. So why they're carrying out those tests is actually to identify vulnerabilities and security loop in your infrastructure, right? In the controls you have in place, right? And there are a lot of security control testing that a penetration tester, that's what we call them. We're still going to talk about 22 soon, right? So there's different type of testing that they carry out. So the first testing they do is that's following the PTES standard. That's the penetration testing execution standard. The first thing you want to do when carrying out a test is vulnerability assessment, which is also part of the stages in security control testing. Right. So a vulnerability assessment is just helping you identify loopholes in the organization. Right. It's checking those controls that are not in place. Maybe you're using a default username and password. So you don't even need to be technical to do this, right? You just need to know how to run the tool. That's all. Right. We're going to, I don't know. So come to think of it, OWASP is not, that ZAP is not part of Kalininus. Okay. Maybe we install it. So I'll look for a way to install it so that we can actually run this vulnerability assessment and we know how to do it, right? We know what it looks like, right? So as I've said, you can you don't need to be a technical person to run vulnerability assessment on any network. So you just need to know, you have a good understanding of the network you're trying to test, then know how to use the software. That is all, right? So vulnerability assessment is going to be testing. So it depends on what you want to test. If it's physical security, you can also use it to test physical security. That's test your mantra or your security guards. That's then you're using this thing to do that, like a drone. But for software, you want to use tools for that. Right? You want to use your Nessus for like a network. You want to use your Kinetics, your Zap for like a web application. Right? I'll see if you can actually install Zap so that we can see how Zap works, how we can use it to carry out for the assessment. So that's the first type of testing, control testing. So the second type is the penetration testing, right? So penetration testing is like a simulated attack on your infrastructure. So they are just simulating what a real life attacker is going to do, right? So they're going to try to bypass all your security mechanism. They're going to try to attack you to see if they can maybe gain access from externally into your internal network, or exploit some sort of vulnerability that might cause your organization potential loss and maybe reputational damage, right? So the goal of a penetration tester is to check for every weaknesses in the security of your infrastructure, right? And you're not just testing or checking. Now you're doing it manually. You are, after you've done your vulnerability assessment and seen those vulnerabilities, you want to make sure that they are not false positive, right? You want to make sure that those vulnerabilities are actually vulnerabilities. You want to carry out a manual testing, right? So after you've identified those weaknesses, you can then give recommendation on how to mitigate them. So there are different things we can, so it just depends on the kind of penetration testing you're doing. There are different things you can do. You can do privilege escalation penetration testing, you can do authentication bypass, you can do brute force attack, you can do a lot of things. You can carry out vulnerability assessment also in the penetration testing, right? So another term they use for penetration testing is ethical hacking. I know almost everybody has said about ethical hacking, right? So penetration testers are also called ethical hackers or the white hat hackers. We have three types of hackers. We have the white hat, we have the gray hat, and we have the black hat. The white hat are the good guys, right? They do it because they are paid to do it. It's their job. They love doing it. They love looking for security vulnerabilities, but they are using it to help organizations. That's what they do. Then we have the gray hat. The gray hat has a mixture of both white and black, right? They have they can still go dark whenever they want to, but they are mainly maybe for fighting for human rights and the likes. So yeah, the anonymous hackers, they call themselves gray hat hackers, right? And that's what they do. They do human rights, try to expose a lot of corruption that is happening in the country. So that's what they do, right? Then we have the black hat attackers. Those ones are the bad guys, right? What they want to do is just extort you, get a lot of money from your organization, or blackmail you as a person, right? With the kind of information they have on your organization, right? But the penetration testers are called the white hat hackers or the ethical hackers. So the unethical hackers now are the black hat, right? So the kind of knowledge a black hat hacker has and the knowledge a white hat hacker has is almost, in fact, it's the same thing, right? Because their white hat hackers are actually put to the dark web to look for information, to look for tools, to build tools they use to carry out their security assessment, right? So the only thing is just the mindset, what they use their skills for. That's just what differentiates them. So a black hat hacker is not more skillful than the white hat. No. So for yourself, so there are different levels of hackers, right? There's the beginner, that's the script kiddie, they call them the rookie. then there's intermediates, and there's the professional, then there's experts. So in cybersecurity, there are a lot of things you need to determine that. Is either you take certifications, then or you actually show your skill maybe in the competition, or the way you actually help cybersecurity community in bringing up others, right? That's how to show your skill level. But most of the time it's through certifications, right? You want to prove that, okay, this certification is hard, it's meant for expert, I can take it and I can pass it, I can be regarded as an expert penetration tester. So it also has to do with the level of years you've actually spent in the industry, right? Your years of experience will actually determine the level you are at in the organization. All right. So penetration tester help organization to review how hackers might be able to compromise your organization or your network system, right? So they are going to check for your vulnerabilities, your loopholes in your systems. Then they're going to tell you how the vulnerabilities can be exploited, then the damage, the vulnerability, the impact of the vulnerability in your organization if the vulnerability is being exploited. So we have 7 stages of penetration testing. There are 7 stages. We have the pre-engagement stage, which is where you're going to have like a one-on-one communication with the client you want to carry out the penetration testing for. You are going to be determining the NDA and the SLA of the penetration test, right? You're going to do a scoping session to know the kind of test you're going to carry out if it's in black box. Okay, so apart from the different type of hackers, there's also different type of penetration tests. So there's the black box penetration test, there's gray box penetration test, and there's the white box penetration test. So for a black box, the organization is not going to tell you anything about themselves. So they give it up to you to go look for that. And it's mostly for external penetration testing, right? So they give you the only thing you know about them is the name of the organization. So you have to look for all the information yourself. That is for the black box, right? Then before you now start testing. So for the gray box, they might provide you a list of IP address, then they'll tell you to do more. Yeah, so that's the gray box. You have some sort of information from the client, right? Then for white box, they give you all the assets they want to test. They don't want you to go beyond that. Because the kind of assets, the way you charge penetration test is depending on the asset you're testing. So the pricing of 10 assets is definitely going to be different from 50, right? So and that applies in the white box testing most of the time. They give you a list of IP address or a URL. They ask you to help test. Then from there, whatever vulnerability you find, you document and you send. So that is the pre-engagement stage. Then there's the intelligent gathering stage. In this stage is where you want to gather all the information about the organization, right? Their emails, the type of username they use, kind of technology they use, are they using any outdated technology? So there's 2 types of information gathering. There's the passive and there's the active. So for the passive, you are not actually directly hitting their network. What you're doing is you are looking for information that is already on the internet, right? You are checking Google. I'm sorry, can that person mute? All right, so you're checking the internet, you're doing some Google docking, you're going to LinkedIn to look for information, you're using tools to help you scrape the internet for information about the organization. So that is a passive information gathering. So there's the active information gathering. So in this information gathering is also where you're going to gather all the assets, right? So that's for the passive. For the active, now all the information you've gathered, the username and password you look for, be you do some git docking to look for username and password with the subdomains you found. Now, this is where you're going to be testing them, right? Actively. That means you're hitting the network. Right, so that's active. So we have two types of information gathering or intelligence gathering. We have the active and the passive, right? So in this stage, what you're just doing is you are learning more about the system. You're learning more about the infrastructure, how it's how it was, the kind of application that is running on it, the kind of technology they use, their emails. You're looking for emails. You're looking for breach the password. You're looking for some domain. You're looking for username and password in Git. You're looking if they have. You're checking if they have any open APIs. You're just looking for a lot of information. So, and this is the stage where penetration testers actually spend most of the time on. Right, spend a lot of time looking for information about that client. So the next one is you're going to be doing your threat modeling. So your threat modeling is, right, you've gathered a lot of assets. You want to prioritize which one are most critical to the organization. Which one should you put more concentration on, right? That's where you do your threat modeling. So after you've done your threat modeling, you do your vulnerability analysis. That's where you're going to be carrying out your vulnerability assessment on those assets, all the assets, right? You're checking for vulnerabilities, for weaknesses, for misconfiguration. You're checking for loopholes, right? That an attacker can actually use to gain access to that organization. Then we have the exploitation. Exploitation is where you are carrying out the manual penetration testing. That obviously the results you got from your vulnerability assessment tool, you want to make sure that those vulnerabilities are actually true, right? They're not just false positive, right? Then there's a post exploitation. So exploitation is okay. Let's say for a network device that is vulnerable to RC. So RC is remote code execution. Is a kind of vulnerability that is going to give you access from maybe a web application to a server, or from a port or a service running on a particular server to give you access to that server, right? So that is RC. That's what RC does. So for post exploitation now, let's say I've gotten access to that server and I'm a normal user and I want to, so the highest privileges you can have as a penetration tester in the penetration testing engagement is the root privilege. That's for the Linux environment. Then the administrator privilege, let's say for a Windows environment, maybe for an Active Directory, a domain controller administrator for Active Directory. So all these privilege escalation processes is in the post exploitation. What can you do with the access, the initial access you've gotten in the exploitation stage, right? So then we then have the reporting. So the reporting is where you're going to document everything, right? All your procedures, the kind of tool you use, the kind of vulnerability you found, the summary of weaknesses, the summary of strengths, the recommendation you have for the different vulnerabilities, and the risk level, right? The report has to be really comprehensive. You actually need to do two different type of reports. There's detailed report for the technical guys, right? And there's the executive report, which you are going to present to the management, right? So that's the executive report. So you don't want to be technical in that. In the report, you can put all the technicalities in there. Executive report would make it more managerial than something the management or a C-level can actually relate to. So the primary purpose of all this, do we have any question in the 7 stages I just mentioned? There is not even part of the class, I just thought to mention it. It's actually good knowledge to have. Now, in our world, that's the world of cybersecurity, logs are very essential. They're very, very important because all the security defense tools you're actually using to protect yourself against attacker are actually using logs to protect you. They're pulling information from somewhere. So logs are actually very important for monitoring and detecting potential security issues in an organization, right? An organization can actually log anything that is happening in their system, in their network, right? It can be maybe somebody's trying to attempt to access resources that they're not supposed to have access to, or maybe they're trying to authenticate a service or like, so you can log everything, right? So these logs are now connected to a SIEM. So this is how a SIEM works. A SIEM is, we'll still talk about that when we get to security operations. But a SIEM is a security incident and event management tool or software that helps you, that it gives you updates on the different events that's happening in the organization. And the SIEM is actually connected to a log source. So the log source is what is actually feeding the SIEM with the type of event that's actually happening in your organization, right? So log review are really important because that's what you're actually going to use to identify that somebody is actually carrying out a suspicious activity in your endpoint, in your organization, right? And after you've identified that, then you can quickly maybe try to respond to the security incident, right? So your IT administrator can actually generate log for everything in the organization. It might be your email logs, might be your application server log. It can be actually be anything, right? And another thing is log is even important in forensic, right? Because on the internet, as you said, everything has a trace. As long as you're clicking a button, you're clicking a link, it can be redirected back to you because you're leaving a footprint. And the footprint you're leaving is the logs, right? You cannot deny the event of the logs that has your footprint in it. So it's really difficult to deny that, right? So organization needs to actually look towards actually taking their logs seriously, right? You want to make sure that you are successfully, you are logging all the event that is actually happening in the organization. So to actually make log review easier, organizations should have separate tools that is helping them collect and store and analyze those logs, right? So those are the type of tool I call the security incident and event management system. So they automate the process of interpreting logs, right? They interpret logs to you and give you what is actually happening in your environment in real time, right? So that's log review for you, where you check your log for security incident that's happening in your organization. And yeah, you take the necessary control you need to take to fix that. So that's a different type of test. Then we have the code review. So code review is mostly done for application developers. So application developers are developers that create applications that user interact with, right? They develop applications. So you, as an application developer, it's not just enough to focus on the functionality of your code, but you also need to be able to like put some sort of focus on the usability of the code, right? But most of them forget about security, right? And that's why we have the DevSecOps now, or SecDevOps, depending on how you call it, right? That's the security development operation, right? So the DevSecOps now integrates security into development processes. So you're not just developing at all, you are actually developing with security in mind right from the start, right from where you're writing your code. Right. So code review is really important because cyber attackers are always looking for vulnerabilities in software applications, whether mobile app applications or web applications, right? And it is important for an organization to inculcate code reviews, right, as part of their development processes. It should not just be when they're ready to deploy or when they're ready to go live. That's when they should be looking for vulnerability prevention testing. No, you also need to have security in mind. You have to put security in place, right? So code review actually just involve the use of softwares to examine the code of an application line by line. So there's this tool called the SonarQube. I don't know if anybody has used SonarQube before, right? Right. So SonarQube help developers to check their code for vulnerabilities, right? Line by line. So that's what SonarQube does, right? It's help them check for code vulnerabilities, and it's going to give you like a recommendation on how to fix those code. So the goal of code review is actually to identify and fix any type of security issues before the application is actually released to the public, right? So that's the use of code review. The Open Web Security Project is actually a methodology, right, that you use to test your web applications or your software application, right? But it's there's the one for software applications. That's the OWASP top 10. Can go to OWASP top 10 and check them out. So there's a one for web application, there's a one for API, there's a one for source code review. I think there's also one for mobile application also, right? So this is for web application. You can also check for MAST. So what I'm trying to say is the Open Web Application Security Project actually helps people improve their web application. They give you guidelines on how you're going to carry out these tests. So from your vulnerability scanning to your penetration testing to your code review, you do all this that they're going to give like a manual that you're going to use to test all this, right? So that is what the Open Web Application Security Project do. So in the context of cybersecurity and web application, right, there are a lot of phases you need to carry out. We spoke about them earlier, but that was for PTS, right? Now it's for OWASP. So in OWASP, you still need to do your information gathering because, right, when it comes to security testing, if you can give information gathering 90% of your time, it's just like sharpening your axe when you want to cut down a tree. So it depends on the amount of attention and how sharp your axe is. That is going to determine the amount of time you're going to spend cutting it down, right? Which applies to cybersecurity. Before you carry out a security test, you need to carry out your information gathering. You need to really collect information about that target. You need to know about the target web server and application. You need to know the kind of technology they're running. You need to see if there are any information about them on GitHub or online or social media. It just depends on the scope of the test. For web application penetration testing now, what you're concerned about is you're concerned about their domain name record, you're concerned about their WHOIS information, their email addresses that is online. Maybe they have a lot of web applications that you could try those email addresses on. Then you should also be concerned about leak passwords, right? Because most organizations, as long as you're a big organization, have actually been involved in a data breach, and they still have some of the some of the employee that have their credential leaked in the organization. Some people will not change it, right? This is why security awareness program is really important, right? So people will never change their password, no matter how. I don't know. Some people find it really hard to actually keep their password. Right. Me personally, I don't keep my password. I don't use a password manager. I don't know any of my password to any of my accounts online. I use a passphrase to create my password sometimes. Right. So if I forget, what I need to do is the only password I need to know is my Gmail password. Right. I need to keep it safe. Right. As long as that Gmail password is safe, every other application is tied to it. So if I lose the password, I can always reset it. So I don't really need to. So yeah, that still actually depends on the web application you're interacting with, because yeah, if you are safe as a user and the owner of the web application or the organization that runs that web application is not safe, it's still you still need to consider yourself not safe, because yeah, it's when it comes to the client-server model, both the client and the server has a lot of work to do when it comes to security, right? So information gathering just cover you looking for all those information online. Then we have the next phase, which is the configuration, deployment, and management testing, right? So this testing, as I said earlier, the client and server has a lot of work to do. Now, this is the work for the server, right? Because this is where you want to test where you are hosting that web application on, right? You want to make sure that your hosting platform is secure, because your web application is as secure as where you're hosting it. It's just like your house, right? Let's say you have a vault, and your house is located somewhere that they have a lot of robbery issues, robberies and break-ins. Be rest assured that even if you have your information in a vault locked, they might still carry the whole vault and go break it somewhere else, because the area itself, the environment itself is not safe, which also ties into configuration and deployment management, because you need to test the hosting platform itself, right? So that is what configuration and deployment management is helping you do. Then there's the identity management, right? Identity management has to do with managing user credentials, right? Your registration as a user, that's when you're clicking the sign up button or the login button, right? So it has to do with your registration process, then the administering registered user process, right? So it focus on a user account. So that's where you're going to be testing for logins, password policy. You're going to be testing if those login button has vulnerability attached to them. Then there's the authentication testing. Authentication is way of verifying that you're human, or you have the access that you're supposed to have, or you are a user in this platform, right? So it has to do with testing your password, right? Your authentication process, your MFA process, right? Any form of authentication actually comes into play here in authentication testing. Then the authorization testing tests, it tests for your privilege, right? The kind of privilege you have in that web application, right? It tests if you're a normal user, or if you have privilege capability, or if you can actually escalate your privilege from a normal user to another user. That's horizontal privilege escalation. Or you can actually escalate your privilege from a normal user to an admin, which is vertical, right? You're moving vertically. That's authorization testing. So that's what authorization testing does for you. Then we have the session management testing. So session management is actually responsible for controlling and maintaining the state at which you interact with the web application, right? So this is where you are actually trying to test your login credentials, right? The hash that is being generated, the session ID that is connected to the login credential. This is where you're testing them, right? Then there's input validation testing. So input validation testing has to do with the kind of inputs you input in a login page, right? In a search bar. So all those buttons that has call for action, that has submit, that has where you can impute any kind of parameters. So that is where you're going to be testing input validation. So in input validation testing, you want to be testing stuff like XSS injection, right? That's cross-site scripting. You want to be testing for SQL injection. You want to test for template injection. Most injection attack actually falls under input validation, right? Because you're imputing something, which means that I can also impute code in it. I can impute SQL queries in it, right? You really want to test that. Then there's the testing for error handling. Yes, how do your web application handle error, right? You want to test that, right? In the case of like a DDoS attack, how does your application handles error? It's really important, because improper handling of error can actually lead to denial of service, right? You want to make sure that your application is handling error the way it's supposed to handle error. Then there's also testing for weak cryptography. So cryptography is actually used to secure web application or web application platform. There's cryptography in your DNS, there's cryptography in your TLS, there's cryptography in your digital signatures, right? It has to look at the kind of signature or the kind of algorithm or the kind of cryptography you use, right? There's weak cryptography that you're not supposed to be using in an organization. There's also really strong cryptography, right? So in cryptography testing, you're testing if you're using AES, if you're using another form of cryptography, if you're using, let's say you're using a symmetric encryption or asymmetric or a digital signature or of any form, right? You're testing the kind of signature you use, right? The kind of cryptography, how are you encrypting those information, right? That's what cryptography stands for. Then the business logic is really important when it comes to security testing, because that is when you're going to be interacting with the web application itself, right? You really want to understand. So when you are testing a web application and you want to carry out a business logic, you really need to understand how that application works, right? What is the application supposed to do? Okay, this is a financial application. I'm supposed to send money from one account to another an account. Can I intercept the request? Can I add more value to it? Can I add a negative value to it? If I try to manipulate the value, what's going to happen? Right? You need to tailor your thoughts towards what the application is doing, right? You need to play out scenarios that could happen, right? You need to play the devil's advocate when you're carrying out the security test, right? So business logic test is really important. Then the application flows also has to do with the business logic, how the application flows. Can you bypass one process to get to another, or can you not get yourself authenticated to the application? So yeah, business logic testing is really important. Then the client testing is the last phase. So in the clients, you want to make sure that the ability for a user, or you want to make sure that you're testing what the user is supposed to do, right? A client should not have the ability to execute code from a web application, right? You want to do those tests. You want to carry out tests on what a client should be able to do or not in a web application, right? So that is our client testing. This is just the penetration testing phases. The pre-engagement, the information gathering is still the same thing as scoping. The recon is still the same thing as information gathering. This discovery is still the same thing as threat modeling. The exploitation is still the same thing as the exploitation, and the post-exploitation, right? There's two types of exploitation. The normal exploitation is, let's say you have gain access to a web application or a network computer as a normal user. What can you do with them? What can you do with the access? Can you move laterally? Can you jump from one system to another? That is post-exploitation. Then the reporting, which is where you're going to report everything you did here, and you send it back to the client. All right. I think we've discussed the different type of tests. So when you're interfacing with the clients and you're really interested in security testing, right, you need to understand the kind of test the client wants, right? The kind of test the client wants actually determines how you're going to build them, right? So in a black box testing, you have no information. Maybe the only thing you're going to have is just the name of the client, right? You are the one that is going to carry out this information gathering to gather every information as much as possible that you can gather on the internet, right? There are a lot of information gathering processes, right, that a normal user can, an attacker or a web application or a net operation tester can use to gather all those information. That is black box. You have no information about their infrastructure at all. Then for the white box, the client is actually going to give you what to test, right? They're going to provide you the DNS, the IP address, the mobile application, the APIs, the network asset. Yeah, they are going to provide everything you need to do. So we don't want to test everything in our organization. We just have the specific, maybe they've done their own threat modeling internally, and they've identified their critical assets. So yeah, so they've identified their critical asset, and that is what they want to test, right? So they are going to give you those assets, and you're going to carry out your test on them as a penetration tester. So that is the white box. Then in the gray box, the gray box is like the hybrid of the white and the black. So the client is going to give you little information about them, maybe their domain name, maybe their most important domain name. So there are some organization that is caught that cut across different multiple domains, like an organization that is going to have like a child company, right? And they want to test everything. You might, so if you're carrying out a black box testing in there, you might omit the child company because it does not have the same domain name, right? Most web application just penetration tester will only focus on the domain name that actually resembles and the domain name that they can prove that you, the client, has, right? Because if you go and test another person's web application without, or maybe you're thinking is a client, one of your clients owns the web application and does not belong to them, you might be facing a court case, right? They might sue you for that. So, which is where gray box testing actually comes into play, right? We have multiple domains we play across, we cut across, and okay, yes, this is the domain for this one, this is the domain for this one. You can do other reconnaissance, information gathering on your own. So yes, that is gray box testing, right? Then there's the internal and the external testing. So the internal testing is still it's still the same ideology that we use for the internal auditing, right? So internal testing has to do with, but the internal testing does not mean that is your internal auditor that is going to carry it out. No, you still pay external auditors to do that. They will come into your organization to carry out security testing and penetration testing, right? You're going to, so it depends on how you work. There are some organizations that does not have like a physical office, right? They operate in the cloud. So for organization like that, you really want to provide them like a VPN that they can use to connect to your network so that they can carry out their testing, right? So that is how that works. Then for external, yeah, as the name implies, I can reach the application externally, and that has to do a lot with web applications that you use to service your end users, that you use to provide services to your end users, right? So that is external. So you are testing it from outside their infrastructure, outside their organization. So there are still some penetration testing exercise that you might need to come in externally. You might need to test externally, but might give you access to their internal network, right? You might gain an access that is going to make you pivot into their internal network, right? It just depends on the kind of vulnerabilities that is on that web application, right? Okay, all right. There are different types of penetration testing. We've spoken about the web application, which has to do with the web application. I know a lot of us interact with web application every day. We use web application to carry out our business processes. We use web application to learn. We use web application to do our shopping of groceries. Yes, yeah, web application penetration test is the web application you interact with every day, right? The testing, the security testing of the web application. So the network has to do with where those servers that is serving the end users are stored, right? The network, right? Or your internal network as an organization. That's the penetration testing of your internal network, right? The assets you have internally. So the security testing. Then there's the hardware. So those hardware you're using, right? Your physical servers, right? Your IoT devices, right? What kind of hardware do you have again? You have a lot of hardware, just depending on the kind of organization or sector you play in. You really want to test those assets. Like there's vulnerability in everything, right? I've been to an engagement that the only thing we need to test is a vault. Though I knew nothing about lockpicking and vault cracking then, and I didn't even know that it's actually part of my job as a penetration tester, right? So you need to think about security of everything, right? When it comes to, if you really want to play in the security assessment and penetration testing role, it's a really technical role. Be ready to take up technical tasks, right? So that is hardware penetration testing. There's a physical penetration testing, right? Can I reach the security mechanism you have in place at some strategic point? Can I breach them to get to the highest privilege sector in your organization or in your organization? Can I reach your IoT devices, your man traps, your security guards, right? That has to do with physical security. Can I bypass your cameras, right? So it has to do with physical security. Then there's the social engineering part of things. So for the social engineering, it really has to do with you as a person, right? The kind of tricks. So there's social engineering in everything we do as human. I mean, if you're trying to create a rapport between your friend or somebody you need an information from, right? And you know that the person is not going to budge unless you like create some rapport, make them feel as if, I'm not saying you should do this, but as penetration testing, you really need to understand the skills, right? You want to create that rapport with them. You want to really give them some sort of comfort in speaking to you, right? Make them feel free to speak to you before you be able to gain information. And sometimes when it comes to penetration testing, depending on kind of social engineering, right, you might even need to do a one-on-one interfacing with a client, a prospective client. So there's a different type of there are different type of security social engineering testing, right? There's one you have to do over the internet, maybe send a phishing mail or a spear phishing attack, right? But there are some that you would have to like. So for physical penetration testing now, so let's say I have an organization, let's say a banking organization, or let me see, let's say bank, right? And I'm supposed to carry out a social engineering attack as part of physical penetration testing to gain access to the highest level of security or highest level that anybody can attain in that organization. What kind of pretext will I use? How am I going to come into the organization? Am I going to pretext myself as a normal employee that works in the organization, or should I come as part of should I create a fake alarm? Then I'm going to like maybe look for maybe a firefighter truck, or be part of people that handle the waste bin to gain access. So you really need to think really deep, and which is what this guy does. No, what Kevin Mitnick does is actually phone vision. So Kevin Mitnick is going to sit in his house and make calls to you, right? And make you feel as if he's the CEO of one company and he needs some information. Right? There's some organizations that don't talk to their employee via phones or WhatsApp. They only do email communication, and that is it. So what can be Wiki does is he's going to pretend, he's going to pretend as if he's your boss, and he's going to ask for some sort of information, and you're going to give it to him. Or he's going to call some sort of organization and tell them that he is who he isn't actually. He's actually pretexting them, right? So pretext has to do with the kind of personality you're going to give yourself, so that you can effectively social engineer your target, right? So social engineering has to do with a lot. It has to do with human communication. It has a lot to do with psychology, right? You need to be able to predict human mind. You need to be able to learn about how to create rapport within even when you're meeting somebody for the very first time, right? There's a way you're going to approach somebody that is going to make them feel as if, man, I'm talking to you as if I've known you for a very long time, right? So some people are naturally gifted, they have it in them, while some people have to actually learn it. Right, so social engineering has to do it a lot, and it even ties into network penetration testing. It ties into everything, right? Because humans are the ones that carry out penetration testing, right? And that is why most organizations, right, they might have tightened their network, their web applications, their hardware, and their physical security, but they still fall victim to social engineering, because humans are the weakest link to security. Right? As long as you have enough time and you have the resources to go after a person, there's a lot of possibilities that you get what you want at the end of the day. It's just how human mind works, right? So yeah, and that is why there's a lot of call for security awareness. We need to do security awareness on this, on that. It's really important because the more you are aware of this tactics, the more you start thinking security too, right? Is this guy? So let me say I just come, I don't know you from anywhere. I just walk up to you and I'm trying to create a rapport with you. I'll have it in my mind automatically that this guy might be carrying out a social engineering test on me, or might just want to get some kind of information from me, right? You already have it inbuilt in you, right? You have security defense inbuilt in you, and which is what security assessment is meant to do. Now, your security defense solution is handling your hardware and your hardware is your network, your web application, and your internet. But your security awareness is defending, is creating some sort of defense in your employees, right? So when you are securing your organization, you should also be securing your users, or else you're still failing at it, right? Which is why security awareness is really important, right?